Welcome to Under the Bleachers. Chris Ransom here, joined by William Yanish and Brandice Bel. And tonight we're going to talk about college football. It's week one. We've got an incredible slate of games for this week. But first, I'm going to recap week zero briefly. Florida State, you'll get the playoff brackets from William and Brandice later in the show as well. But week zero, three games. I saw three games on television. I think there were seven that aired, and you had to get Hawaii on pay-per-view. So the only way to get Hawaii, Delaware State, you had to buy pay-per-view package, which is crazy. But let's focus on the three main games. I think there's three main ones, and then there's everything else. There's Georgia Tech, Florida State. Georgia Tech upsetting Florida State in Dublin, Ireland. That was the main one. The other two games were like secondary games. Montana State came back against New Mexico. They trailed 31-10, and they came back and won in the fourth quarter with 21 unanswered points, which was just nuts. And then the third game, I believe, was the Nevada SMU game, which Nevada led heading into the fourth quarter. SMU's offense was kind of sloppy, but SMU did enough when the game was on the line to win. But I think you'd agree, William, out of those seven games, those were the three most audiences cared for. And then everything else was just a meh burger in week zero.
Yeah, for sure. That was the thing, like, especially Florida State, after everybody saying they got snubbed last year after the Jordan Travis, his injury and then, whatever led to that. That was one thing that was kind of surprising, especially, when I turned it on, I noticed that Ugalele was, actually, making some pretty quick decisions and doing some things that he didn't do so well at Oregon State. You could definitely tell that he's been part of Mike Norvell's off-season program, but it just seemed like maybe they weren't ready or something like that. I mean, it kind of got down to, hearing about this Georgia Tech defense and everything else. And, I definitely liked, I turned on a few games of the quarterback for Georgia Tech, Haynes King, last year, and thinking maybe that I was going to do an evaluation on him. But, after a minute, I was like, he really wasn't ranked up that high. I didn't really know if he was coming out that high, and it was kind of like, maybe I'll just put this off. It didn't seem like the most exciting prospect to do at the time. But, I mean, coming out and, doing that week one, I mean, especially, 12 team format that the playoffs are going to and everything else, it's kind of one of those, opening games, and it's kind of like the first few weeks, what they call a tune-up game, and the tune-up game, you always take a team and you put up against, Valdosta State or, whoever, and really get them out there to, get the blood flowing and everything else, to get a win in the season opener. But that is one thing I'd also like to touch on, man, is some of these schedules this year, that I've seen. I mean, it just goes, there's so many that are so tough, and then some that just look like a cakewalk, But I'll return
One
it to
thing
you,
I
Chris.
noticed, William, and you might agree with this to a point, Brandis, is the last three ACC champions have all had incredible turnover after the NFL draft. 2021, Pitt went from ACC champions with Kenny Pickett to being a blip on the radar. Same thing happened with Clemson after the 2023 draft, where they lost Miles Murphy, they lost Brian Bressie, they lost so much defensive talent, and then they lose the opener to Duke on Monday night in week one. And then this year, Florida State lost a ton of talent to the 2024 draft. Jared Verse, Brian Bressie, Keon Coleman, Jordan Travis, Jaheim Bell, you name it. And they lose to Georgia Tech. So there is a recurring pattern here with all these ACC champions and them not being able to recover from the turnover lost to the NFL draft. It's 3 years in a row now that's happened. So I think we have to point out the correlation. And Miami might be next year's victim with Cam Ward and Martinez leave and they win the ACC this year. But we'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's, what do you think, William and Brandice? Because I noticed that, and we've seen all three of those teams lose after winning the conference title with so much talent.
It's really just the players, like which player goes, because I don't think that Clemson's really ever recovered from Trevor Lawrence's loss. I think you can lose a quarterback, but if the quarterback is kind of your franchise player, if you will, in your league, it's a different thing. I don't think that, like with Auburn, they're going to really suffer the loss of Bo Nix that much. I think they'll be okay. But some programs, especially, when you get into your Power Fives, when you lose a quarterback that's got a high QBR and you don't have another guy kind of behind him that can do just as much or almost as much, it's going to be difficult to win. And then Florida State also lost Trevor Etienne, and I don't think that people are really talking about it, but they didn't lose that game by much. And another running back that is obviously as good as him might have made the difference.
Yeah, the Gators lost Etienne to Georgia, and the running back from Florida State, what's his name? He was drafted by the Cardinals in the third round. Trey Benson. Yeah, they lost him too. That's a great point, Brandice. But yeah, just that's the thing. Florida State had a ton of turnover. I thought they had more turnover than Clemson. It was the biggest reason why I didn't pick them to win the ACC, because I think Joey had Louisville over Miami. I had Miami over Florida State. I'm not even sure Florida State's going to make the ACC title now. It might be Miami versus Clemson, but I don't trust Klubnik. Brandice is right about Clemson's quarterbacks. I mean, Ugalele and Klubnik were both 5-star recruits, but Klubnik just got his rear handed to him by Joe Milton in the Orange Bowl as a freshman, and it's just brutal to watch him play in that. And he didn't look that much better in year 2 as the full-time starter. So I'm very hesitant about Clemson for that reason. I do think Louisville, I think they got Tyler Show from Texas Tech, and if they did, they could be the challenger to Miami. But outside of Miami and Louisville, I really don't see a team that checks off all the boxes, because if Ugalele plays like this, I don't know if Florida State can compete. They should take care of business against Boston College on Monday. But hey, that's what we all thought about Clemson when they went to Duke last year, and Mike Elko and Duke surprised the country, just like Georgia Tech and Ireland this week.
Yeah, for sure.
I think when you get those,
that's one thing.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say really quickly, when you get those kind of like matchups that you're not exactly sure about, when teams come in and people know that they've lost players, and then you end up having an upset like that, what it does, it kind of incites hope for other teams that are coming to play them that, well, if Georgia Tech did it, we can do it too. And you end up, maybe you come in with a chip on your shoulder, but now these other teams that everyone counted out, they're starting to see the holes in your offense and your defense.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like how Tom Brady was just touching on the fact, with the transfer portal, there's so much just coming in and learning a playbook. They're not learning a system, like he said, and I've noticed a ton of that, that they, pardon it, kind of dumbed it down to where, these players don't have, such a hard time performing, after finally getting into the season and such. And I think it's been simple down between everything, between college football, between, pro football, and, I have Ugalele, projecting as a pro quarterback, but, the thing is a backup quarterback. And I believe I mentioned I put in his report last fall, talking about, where are the wins? I believe that was specifically a question that I put in there. And it just kind of goes over, like I always talk about, coaching and the quarterback, kind of run the team. And there's not so many dominant coaches here in in the ACC either. So, of course, it could be that that linebacker Kyle Efford, the one with the shoulder pads, neck roll up about this big, and maybe he was just a bad luck charm on Ugalele and Florida State, but
Yep.
Sorry, I was thinking about Trevor's brother. Travis went to Florida State. Trevor went to Florida, but yeah, it's one of those things also with Georgia Tech. I don't know if anyone follows them, but just being from Georgia, like I catch more of their games than I probably catch any of the others. They're kind of sneaky, they don't win by a lot against teams that they should, but they also don't lose by a lot against teams that you think would blow them out. They fight, and I was pleasantly surprised. I'm always going to root for the Georgia team, and I do remember everyone being so pissed about the fact that Florida State didn't make it into the playoffs, and I just thought, I mean, come on, guys, like I get it, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think people understand that like these schedules sometimes kind of get you to the top in a way that like you may not have deserved. And I was upset that Alabama kind of got in, but sometimes also I think the way that it used to be done, they do give you a little extra, brownie points for having won the championship before in the past.
Yeah, and after Duke beat Clemson last year, I kind of had a feeling Mike Elko was going to get hired by another team, and that's what happened. Texas A&M picked him up. I'm wondering if Billy Napier gets fired, do they go after Georgia Tech's head coach now because he beat Florida State with Georgia Tech? That's going to be super appealing to Florida if they move on from Napier after this season, which he is the Vegas odds-on favorite to be the first head coach fired at this moment. I don't know if that changes. Depends on how Graham Mertz plays, but we can touch on that quickly, but then we'll get into the 12-team playoffs for each of you, and then we'll go through some of the lineups if you'd like.
Sure.
You got any thoughts on that, Brandice? Because I think Georgia Tech's head coach pretty much if they have a winning record, I think he's going to get poached by another team in the offseason. But I don't really want to touch on that because we still have a full season of games to play. It's a little too early to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think in college, they don't really pull that trigger too early because it's just too much of a shakeup early in the season.
Yeah, but once Duke was 5-0, everybody knew Gelko was going to get an offer. But let's talk about your playoffs, or we can talk about some of the games this week. Which would you prefer to? What direction would you prefer to go in, William, Brandice?
I think let's talk about what's happening in a few days. I think me and William had both discussed, the lineup this week and just getting into some of the games to watch. I know I've got my game that I'm really interested in, and it may be a little shocking, but I'm going to shoot it over to you, William.
I've got 2 Thursday night games, North Carolina, Minnesota, North Dakota State, Colorado. Are there any other Thursday games besides those 2 that stand out that warrant like having a discussion about?
Nope. Not in my opinion. I'm not super interested
in the same page with you, Brandice. I just want to confirm that with William before we get into these Thursday night games.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Sounds like we're all in agreement. So why don't we pick one game to start with, and then we'll preview the next game. I'm guessing you want to pivot into the North Dakota State Colorado game first. So we'll do that, and then we'll break down North Carolina, Minnesota. The Thursday and Friday night games feel underwhelming compared to last year, but to be fair, the Saturday games this year are much, much better than last year. Last year you had Shadur, TCU, and then the night game was North Carolina, South Carolina, Rattler, May. William and I enjoyed it, but most college football fans would agree that was an underwhelming Saturday night week 1 game compared to previous seasons. So that's the thing. And this year, I feel like they did a much better job setting up the matchups for Saturday. But we'll dive into the Thursday games first. North Dakota State, Colorado. Can the Bison upset Colorado? Probably not, but I think they're going to make the first half interesting. And if Colorado's sloppy, they're undisciplined, anything can happen. But I think Colorado handles business and pulls away in the third quarter.
I think Colorado has to really handle business. You know, I mean, with all the pressure that has been put on, and you know, all the words that have been said between the media and between Dion and everything else, this isn't a game that, you know, Colorado can go out there and afford to lose. You know? Especially after, you know, last year they came out, you know, week one and won, and everybody was like, oh, you know, but you know, like I said, there are some things that have to get straight, and I'm not sure, you know, these things off the top of my head for Shedeur to capitalize on are his leadership, for one, meaning, you know, everyone knows he's a quarterback of this team, but, you know, does the team know it? And, you know, are they taking more, you know, what do you want to call it? Are they taking more, the Colorado, like I said, they came out and won last year, but, you know, whether or not, you know, this is Shedeur's team or Dion's team, you know, it doesn't seem like so much, you know, there was, you know, a good start of the season for a few games, and then it seems like everything came unraveled last year at the CSU game, you know, after what's his name was hit, and you know, there was just the whole deal. That is one thing I feel this team needs to really, you know, take to the next level. Dion also, or not Dion, but Shedeur rather, also needs to come out and say, or, you know, not come out and say, but come out and decide who, you know, whether it's him on the field making the decisions or whether it's his father, you know, making decisions. And I feel, you know, that's a whole thing in maturity and becoming a man and exactly where he is right now. And I feel that, you know, that is a huge thing to this game, and that's going to kind of set a tone to me, you know, for this next year. And I wish him all the best, but, you know, they've got some things to square away on this team, you know, before that they can consider it successful. And I don't feel that, you know, a complete win and loss record is gonna be, you know, that decide whether or not they're that successful. But it's gonna decide, you know, whether part of the team unravels or not. So I kind of really put it that way.
Brandice, what do you want to add to the Colorado game against North Dakota State?
One thing that I'm interested to watch is that I think they came out fairly strong. If you know, well, I'd say really strong last year against teams that they weren't really expected to beat. I mean, you know, having a season where they'd only won one game previously in 2022, it wasn't very difficult for them to come out stronger. But you know, they could have flopped. And some say they did flop by ending out, I think 4-8. But I'm interested to see, okay, the hype is died down a little bit. Now everyone has kind of gotten over the fact that, like, okay, it's Deion Sanders. He's coaching a college football team with his kids. I mean, he'd done it at Jackson State, but it's a little different when you're talking about a Pac-12 now, Big 12 team. You don't have that same level of, I guess, just intensity that we had last season, where it was like, well, what is he going to do? How is the team going to react? And having played football and playing football myself, I know that a lot of times you feed off of the energy of your coach. And I think that sometimes that works well and sometimes it doesn't work well. And I think that a lot of the reason that they struggled in some of those games after, it wasn't so much media publicity about like, oh, he's talking about your mom and all of this stuff, is because when you get down to the fundamentals and you take away all of the media fluff, now you have to just play sound football. And I think a lot of those kids were really excited to play well for Dion, and also, excited about NIL deals and things that didn't really help them on the field. So what I'm going to be interested to see this year is, and in this game in particular, how Dion and the staff around him kind of crafts the environment on the sidelines in the pregame. Everyone likes a show. That's great. But I think those things affected the players sometimes in ways that they couldn't live up to the hype. And it's really important for them to really just focus on playing fundamental football and doing their job.
Yeah. And I think Colorado's got to stick to fundamentals. They've got to play good football. I think they'll be tested more next week when they play Matt Rule in Nebraska, but we'll talk about that game then. Other game I want to touch on quickly is North Carolina versus Minnesota. This game will be on Fox. I'll probably be flipping back between those two games on Thursday night. North Carolina, they do have a really good running back, Omari Hampton, who I have a second-round grade on, and Kamon Rucker, their edge rusher. I have a late first on Kamon Rucker, but Minnesota's got a left tackle that could sneak into the second, will be a third-round pick at the very worst. So looking at this game, I think the Minnesota Golden Gophers left tackle and North Carolina's edge rusher, that is going to be the key matchup to watch. And it's in Minnesota. It's at Ariate Easley. He's the top-rated player in the new NCAA game at left tackles. But Ursi's film is okay, but it's not as good as Falele's was a few years ago when Falele got drafted by the Ravens. But I think Rucker versus Ursi is going to be a big matchup because Rucker's a first-round edge rusher on my board, and I have him at number 3 edge for this year's draft, and Ursi, one of the top-rated tackles in the country. So that's going to be a big matchup in the trenches, and we know that's important. But Omarion Hampton, I think this is going to be a statement game for him. I think the Tar Heels are going to win, but it's in Minnesota, where the Vikings used to play before US Bank Stadium opened. But yeah, PJ Fleck, Mac Brown, that should be a fun opener. I don't think it's going to generate the buzz the Colorado game's going to generate simply because of Dion and Shadur and what they're going to do. But I do think after that game, this is the most exciting Thursday night game.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing that I see is after, Drake May ended up being the 3rd overall draft pick, I see Max Johnson showing up in UNC. And, when I watched him at Texas A&M 2 years ago, I was not very high on him at all. In fact, I might have had some words on him about being maybe the worst quarterback that I've ever tried to evaluate.
I think he beat Drake May in the Orange Bowl, or Sam Howell. He beat Howell in the Orange Bowl. That was the year before May took over as the starter, I believe. But he's fallen from grace since then, like you stated.
Yeah, for sure. And, I don't know what's up to the team. It's an experienced team, 13 starters coming back, 6 on offense. Everything else, but like you said, I think it'll likely be, one in the trenches because on the defense side of this ball, there's another 6 that are coming back, and 4 of them are in the front 7, and I think that's going to have a lot to do with this game over Minnesota, and of course, UNC winning. It could be an upset special, but probably shouldn't be. And maybe Max Johnson has improved a little bit, but
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting also to see whether or not they play Max Johnson exclusively. They are saying that Connor Harrell's been dressing out and that the plan is to actually have a 2 quarterback rotation. So
that's actually, really interesting because it would make a difference. I'm not sure what that second guy throws, but I know Max Johnson is a left-hander, and throwing a ball with an opposite spin has an effect on a lot of players, as does just overall velocity, plus overall velocity of the ball, plus touch and everything else. But I know the left-hand spin to the right-hand spin has got to be a little bit to overcome. So.
I guess we can move on to Saturday night.
Yeah, I'll pull up the quick slate of Friday night games. There was nothing that interested me. Lehigh Army, no. Temple, Oklahoma, no. FAU, Michigan State, no. Elon, Duke, Western Michigan, Wisconsin, and TCU, Stanford. Like I told you and Brandice, very underwhelming slate of Thursday and Friday night games compared to last season. But I think this Saturday, because last year felt like the worst Saturday for opening day in about 10 or 15 years. This year, much better opening day. And look, I love Drake May and Spencer Rattler, but most college football fans would agree, William, that's an underwhelming opening day game to have in the 8 p.m. time slot.
Very much. It was a decent game, but, both those players, Spencer Rattler didn't do so well after that. I was expecting a little bit more, because of just how I thought of them from the year before. But,
I watched the QB1 on him when he I don't know if you guys ever watched that show. I don't know if it's still on, but I remember when all of the quarterbacks, a lot of them now that are in the NFL, were on that show at some point, and he just had like the cockiest attitude, and I was like, I'm gonna be interested to see like how far this guy gets, if he's that great. I mean, I get it. Like, you're a QB, you basically get treated like a god in your high school and then in your college, and then if you make it to the NFL. But I mean, I never really thought that he was that great. Like, the season that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence was on, it was like, wow, these guys are going to be amazing. And I mean, I hate that Justin Fields is having the trouble he is. Hopefully he does better at the Steelers. But yeah, Spencer Rattler, no, he just seems like I don't want to say a terrible person, but he just seemed like a douchebag.
In high school, yeah, I think he matured as he got to South Carolina, but he kind of he went from, I guess you could say, douchebag in high school to diva at Oklahoma, and then he came into his own the last 2 years at South Carolina, I feel like.
Yeah.
He wasn't he was more mature in college, I'll give him that, but after Caleb took the job from him, he did kind of pout on the sidelines, so I could see why that would come across as diva-ish.
Yeah, that's probably something I should have watched, before I gave him such a high grade this last year, but I wasn't even paying attention to TV really, besides football.
I've got
he's talented for sure.
William, I've got 2 games for the noon time slate: Clemson, Georgia, and Penn State, West Virginia. I've got Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt as a third game. I know that game has gotten some traction. Is there anything else outside of those 3 games for the noon time slot? Chattanooga, Tennessee, is one I'm on the fence about, but I really don't think we need to waste time talking about that game. Nico Imaleva is going to crush Chattanooga in that one. So, I mean, I think those 3 are good noon games to discuss. Which one of those 3 do you want to start with?
I'll just start out with with what is that? Is it Oh, no, I had something else in my head. Never mind. Repeat yourself, please, man. Sorry.
There's only one. There's only one. We really could just
We're
throw the
going to
rest
save
of
that
them in
one
the
for
trash.
last. Clemson George is the big enchilada. I feel like we're going to save that for last because everyone knows that's the big one. So we got Virginia Tech Vanderbilt, which I really don't think there's much appeal in this game, but there's a lot of people that think Vanderbilt's going to cover the spread. And then there's a lot of people that also think Virginia Tech's just going to win outright. It's in Vanderbilt. I rarely talk about Vanderbilt on this podcast, but they are an SEC team and they are hosting, so I think they have a fighting chance here. But I like the Hokies. 27-13. The spread's Virginia Tech 13.5. But I think the Hokies barely cover the spread, and Vanderbilt actually makes this game close in the first half before Virginia Tech pulls away in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a Virginia Tech's game all the way. Vanderbilt's kind of what you were, kind of talking about, that they were, not so much of the. They might keep it close, like you were saying.
Virginia Tech's got a good secondary, though. Like, they've got some NFL prospects on their secondary this year, but they've always had a good secondary. But this year, it feels like their best secondary since they had Brandon Facey-Sod back in the day. So, and they've had some other really good corners before that, too.
Yeah, but like you said, probably to go on to what is it, Penn State versus
Penn State, West Virginia. That's on Fox. The Virginia Tech Vanderbilt game is going to be on ESPN at noon, right after College Game Day. But Penn State, West Virginia, that's in West Virginia, Morgantown. I think Penn State's going to win. This game should have been in prime time. I mean, Penn State got this game at home in prime time. West Virginia didn't. And West Virginia's crowd's a lot rowdier at night compared to the day. Penn State, I feel
That's
like
because of
their
the
crowd's
alcohol.
much rowdier at night too. Yeah, that's true with the alcohol. But I think crowds are rowdier at night. I mean, I could tell you about a Tennessee-Georgia game I went to in 2001 where there was a really drunk Uga fan. Like, my dad went to Tennessee. We went to a Tennessee-Georgia game in 2001 when Quincy Carter was at Georgia. And the Georgia fan sitting next to me was, like, super drunk. And I think there was also a fan that got arrested for streaking. But let's move on to Penn State, West Virginia.
Just kidding. I always thought I love streakers. I think it's so funny. Like, I'm sorry, but like, streakers are hilarious. Like, I love streakers. I hate that they I don't want to see them like on TV, but like, I hate that they like don't show, because I'm always like, how do they do this? Like, how do you plan this? It's such a crazy
part
thing to do.
is when the linebacker, like, what was that, Rob Ninkovich or something, one year just flat out nailed.
I think Bobby Wagner laid out a streaker in the Rams game a few years ago when Bobby Wagner was on the Rams. I think he laid out, I don't know if it was a streaker or just a crazy fan running onto the field, but Wagner, I think, laid him out.
I remember Wagner. I remember a dude for the Patriots, and I remember a couple others, and it's like, man, aren't you guys, afraid to get hurt, or something, Should you go have a Gatorade, watch a guy run around?
I mean, like, not only that, though, like, it's a free timeout. Like, come on. Like, let them live. Sorry, I'm Team Streaker. I just think they're hilarious.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious, too. And then I think there was another one at the Red Sox game I went to in 7th grade, but that was during a commercial break, whereas the Tennessee-Georgia streaker was actually during the game, live on television. But I don't know if they showed the streaker on television because I was at the game in person, but there was a streaker in both of those games. But yeah, Penn State, West Virginia, sorry about the holdup, Drew Aller. Just a great childhood story, but, Penn State, West Virginia, that's going to be a crazy game. I think Penn State's going to win, though, and Aller's got to show he can play well on the road. He didn't start as a freshman. Sean Clifford started over him as a freshman. Sophomore, he struggled in those road games. struggled at home against Michigan, struggled on the road against Illinois and Ohio State. I got to see Aller dominate on the road. And he should get done, but I still got to see it in order to believe in Aller, because right now I think he's a 4th, maybe 5th round prospect. I think I had a 3rd on Hackenberg the year he was drafted. And I'm lower on Aller than I was on Hackenberg. So right now, that could obviously change at the end of the year, because Aller was a 5-star recruit. Hackenberg wasn't. He was like a 4-star recruit. So Aller was more highly regarded coming out of high school, but I haven't seen what I'd like to see from Aller after all the hype he got out of high school, entering Penn State. I got to see that this year. Nicholas Singleton at running backs in his draft year too. I mean, this team did lose Olu Fashanu at left tackle and Caden Wallace at right tackle, but they still have Abdul Carter back. They lost their 2 defensive ends, Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac. They lost 3 corners to the 24 draft after losing Porter in 2023. They do have Kevin Watson Jr. at strong safety. So, they do have some talent. But at the same time, and West Virginia's got a good left tackle as well, and a good left guard. So I think Carter versus that left side of West Virginia's offensive line, that's going to be the matchup to watch. And the thing with Carter is he won some one-on-ones against Ohio State, but he also got manhandled on a couple of plays. So I think we're going to see some of that in this game. But I think Penn State handles business. I'm going to go Penn State 27, West Virginia 10.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing. The first thing I actually had to look up, I didn't have it written down, was where West Virginia was ranked. According to Lindy here, he's got West Virginia at 30. Because they're always up there, and this might be the upset special that I was talking about. Considering Drew Aller, they have that running game that you mentioned, but Drew Aller is as a quarterback, I'm not sure yet. I haven't seen anything that would make me put him anywhere really yet above the 3rd round. I haven't gone into a full evaluation of him, which I'm sure I will this year. But the point is, the scattershot accuracy that he is back there with all this, might be something, because West Virginia is always ranked high, always ranked up there somewhere, and they do seem to have their have that. But the Penn State defense is what I'm looking at for West Virginia to go up against, but I'm not sure that they have any chance of that. Considering who they're bringing back here and another 4 returning in the front 7 of that defense. Again, I feel definitely Penn State will win. Like I said, it might be an upset, but Penn State, if I had to pick a score, would be 30-17.
That's fair. We both have a 13 to 17 point win. Let's get to the big enchilada in the noon slate. The game Brandice was referring to, is it Clemson versus Georgia? I'd like to solve the puzzle, Pat. I know Pat Sajak recently retired from Wheel of Fortune. So, but yeah, that's the game. That's probably the game we're going to talk about. That's probably the game you wanted to mention. But yeah, Cade Klubnik, Carson Beck. I trust Beck way more than I trust Klubnik, but I think this game, I think I have Georgia winning 34-13, but I think I have Georgia leading 14-13 at the half before pulling away in the second half. And that's the thing. Clemson can keep this close early. I think Georgia's going to pull away in the second half. But, 2 years ago, they were in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Bo Nix's first start, and I think it was 63-7. And Georgia just blew out Oregon in that game. I think that was Bo Nix's first game as quarterback in Dan Lanning's first game as head coach after winning a championship with Kirby Smart as a defensive coordinator. So, Oregon's came a long way since then, but, now we get to see that type of growth from Carson Beck, stacked offense. I think Georgia handles business here. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia scored 40 on Clemson, since they did lose Nate Wiggins to the NFL draft. And, a lot of good corners that came out of Clemson. A.J. Terrell with the Falcons is one. Cordrea Tankersley. They had the corner in the 22 draft that went to the Vikings. Andrew Booth Jr. traded to the Cowboys. So they've had a lot of good corners in recent years. But I think Georgia could score 40 because Georgia's got like 4 different NFL receiver prospects. And Clemson, I don't know if they have that shutdown corner they've had over the past 10 years, dating back to the first title Dabo Swinney won. I don't know if they have that this year. So, I do think it's going to be – I don't think Clemson's defense is going to give up 40, but I wouldn't be shocked if Georgia scored 40 on them, because they blew out Oregon in Bo Nix's first start. And that game was in Mercedes-Benz Dome as well. I think the last time these two teams played, it was Charlotte. It was Bank of America Stadium, and it was a defensive game in 2001 or 2022 or 2021. It was a defensive game in Charlotte where Georgia prevailed. It was a very sloppy offensive game, very good defensive game, though. Brandice, William, why don't you break this game down?
Did your mic stop?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the audio here on Restream.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly, Brandice. Why don't you break down Clemson, Georgia?
Yeah, I think that what's going to be interesting to watch with Clemson and Georgia, it's going to be Georgia's clearly got, something to prove, getting knocked out in the playoffs the way that they did. Clemson had been a team to beat in the past, but I think, that's not so much going to be an issue for them now. I'm going to be interested to see if they hit the ground running, because I'd like to see them, like you said, put up 40, but I hate that they tend to be a second half team. I would like to see them come out and really show, hey, we should have been, number one last year. We should have done a three-peat. We're still ranked number one, and this is why. If this game is close, I'm going to be upset. I think you have to kind of put your foot on these teams' necks early so that everyone that they play after, they already know, like, this is going to be a dogfight, and we could lose this game. When you allow these teams to kind of sneak in and like hang around, sometimes it gives the message to other teams, and they don't have an easy schedule this year, that maybe you could sneak a win in. Maybe they're not really like putting their foot on the gas as they should. And Kirby Smart knows that he's in a situation right now where you can't really go too many seasons as a head coach without making it to that championship game once you've kind of established yourself as a champion. I am going to be interested to see what the defense looks like. I'm going to be interested to see how Carson Beck comes back, if he comes back as strong. I think we all believe in him as a quarterback. He's got a pretty decent QBR. But I'm not totally, sold on the defense and the secondary. Their D-line is pretty strong, but I'd like to see, Malachi Starks and some of these other guys really showcase that secondary, because I think every team in the SEC knows that it's probably the weakest part of our defense.
Yeah, that's one thing, with Georgia. I definitely see them scoring a ton of points because of who they have, but I still haven't been able to, get a bead on who Carson Beck is when, there's urgency needed, or, in in the right time, you know, who he is. You know, like Brandice mentioned, you know, that they come back in like, you know, a second half team and all, but and before I'm fully convinced on that, you know, on giving Carson Beck, you know, or before I see that from him, should I say, you know, I'm not, you know, comfortable, you know, going out there saying they're going to thrash everybody or anything like that, you know. And you know, West Virginia is, like I mentioned, not West Virginia, Clemson, sorry. And you know, a lot of people have a lot of high hopes for Clemson this year, but I just don't know how far that's, you know, still going up against, you know, a team like Georgia. So I'll definitely, you know, pick Georgia to win, and you know, it would probably be about 41-17 or so.
Yeah, everyone is saying, you know, don't sleep on Cade Klubnik. And I mean, I'm not too sure, you know, about him as a quarterback. But Clemson's got a good program, so I don't think they're going to come out there and just, you know, throw a goose egg. But they do have a really fairly easy schedule this year, so you know, they likely will lose this game, but they still have a decent chance of winning out in the rest of their schedule.
You know, I've seen a few things from Cade Klubnik. You know, I've seen him look like a quarterback, and then I've seen him just look terrible. You know, and it's kind of another one of those things that, you know, I got to watch more to really, you know, make a judgment on someone. But
Aller and Klubnik both looked terrible last year, and both were 5-star recruits in high school. Those two and Weigman were all highly recruited now. To be fair to Weigman, he does look better than both. I don't think he's the first-round prospect the media's hyping him up to be, but to be fair to Weigman, I think he's a better prospect than both Klubnik and Aller. But that's not saying much.
He's got a higher QBR, but I mean, yeah. Matt Ryan had a really high QBR, so you know that doesn't always translate.
Yeah,
QBR, I think that's a little bit of generated, you know, hype by the media, but that's something else. But anyway, yeah. No, with Weigman, you know, I see him, and I see all these mechanical things, you know, that need cleaned up with him, and then, you know, all of a sudden I see him toss this, you know, beautiful, you know, 30-40 yard, you know, touchdown pass, and it's like, okay, where'd that come from?
He had a lot of good weapons last year, but I'll get into that a little bit later. I want to break down the 3:30 games. We'll save Miami, Florida versus Florida for last. I know you've got a few 3 p.m. games on the slate: Colorado, Texas, and Akron, Ohio State. What other 3:30 games do you have on that slate, William, besides those two?
Okay.
I'm guessing those are the only two. So how about I think yeah. Yeah, so as far as Ohio State Akron, this is probably going to be a blowout by Ohio State, but I mean, it is one of the games William mentioned, and I do think Will Howard's debut will be interesting. I mean, Indiana was having success against Ohio State last year in Kyle McCord's first start with the Buckeyes, and I was pretty nervous as a Buckeye fan. I don't feel that nervousness this year with Akron coming to Columbus. I think Will Howard's going to handle business in that one. Ohio State's running game should be deadly. I'm going to go 56-7 Ohio State. I'm giving Akron a touchdown out of pity. I have no idea why. This is a game where we should pitch a shutout against Akron, but it's pretty hard to pitch a shutout, even against a MAC team like Akron. So And I hope this is the last occasion that I have to use the pity touchdown line on the Under the Bleachers podcast. But yeah. Anything you want to say about this game, Brandice and William, before we get to Colorado State, Texas?
I look forward to seeing, Will Howard out there. Like I said, what I did see of him, I watched a couple of games already this spring. I like him. I've got probably a third round pick floating around there someplace. And, he's the second leading SEC, passer all time. So, I mean, he's experienced there. So I just look forward to, seeing exactly how far.
Everybody's saying Jordan's better than Ohio State because of the quarterback play. And I think that's a fair argument. But the one thing I'd add is Will Howard won a conference championship at Kansas State against an undefeated TCU team. Carson Beck lost his conference title to Alabama last year and Jalen Milroe. So that's the one thing Howard has that Beck doesn't right now. But that's probably going to change after the season.
We're not really comparing apples to apples there.
Exactly.
So, it's kind of, to me, like, well, I won Dancing with the Stars and you won like your high school, dance.
America's Got Talent. I don't know.
I mean, what are we doing?
I do like that Jalen Milroe, though. I mean, yeah, over Akron, that should be a cakewalk for Ohio State, especially this Ohio State.
JT Tuimoloau out, Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher group is going to be deadly. I think their defensive tackle situation, their cornerback duo, Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock, that's a good cornerback room. They've got Egbuka, Carnell Tate, and they got a freshman starting at receiver. That's why their slot receiver from last year transferred to Penn State, because he was losing some reps to Whittington. I think he lost some rep. Let's focus on Julian Fleming, not Whittington. Julian Fleming. That's why he transferred to Penn State. But yeah. Next game is Colorado State, Texas. Colorado State's quarterback and their wide receiver, Torrey Horton, could have gone in the portal. They stayed loyal to Colorado State. They talked about it on Media Day. They're going to play Texas. Texas is favored by 13.5. I've got Colorado State covering the spread. 27-14 Longhorns. I think the Colorado State Rams cover the spread. I mean, spread's only 13.5. I think some have it at 19.5, but
that's one thing about this team, coached by Jay Norvell. Last year they've got,
it's 32.5, not 13.5. I apologize. The spread is 32.5. I do not think Colorado State is 32.5 points worse than Texas. Even if it's a 31-10 game, which I think that's the max score I can see Texas winning by 3 touchdowns. 32.5, really? That's way too high for the point spread. Sports Illustrated, USA Today have 32, and the point spread is minus 32.5 for Texas. So I would bet on Colorado State. I feel like that's an easy money play. You're being spotted 32.5 points. As long as Colorado doesn't lose by 5 touchdowns, you're golden.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, Jay Norvell and
5 touchdowns.
Fowler, is his name. I saw him make a few plays last year against Colorado. That was one thing that I'm really watching because,
I've got Torrey Horton in the first round, but Braden Fowler and Nicolasi, the quarterback, coming back. He's been with the Rams since 2022, and he was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year last year. And, I think both of those guys are NFL caliber prospects on the road. I think Fowler, Nicolasi will be a 26 or 27 day 2 pick. And I think Horton's probably going to go in the first round. I think because Horton and Xavier Legette were the last two wide receivers to drop a target last year, William. Those were the last two receivers to drop a target, and they were pushing each other for that last spot. So I think Horton could sneak into the first round this year like Legette did. And they were both 24 years old last year. So I am high on Horton. So I don't know how Texas is favored by 32.5. It just feels like you're handing everyone who bets on Colorado State free money. So my gambling advice would be to bet on Colorado State to cover the spread, because I don't think Texas is 32.5 points better than Colorado State. That just feels like a free space in bingo. But that's just my 2 cents. Texas will still win straight up, but I don't think they cover that spread. I think that spread's too high to begin with. I would lower it to like 26.5 or something more realistic. You don't have to lower it all the way to 21, which is where I think Texas will win by. But at the same time, 32.5, that's way too high. I would lower it to some degree if I were running a sports book. But yeah, Quinn Ewers statement game. It's going to be Quinn Ewers, Isaiah Bond. And then you're going to have Colorado. You're going to have Fowler, Nicolasi, Torrey, Horton. Those are going to be the connections in this game. But the bigger question will be how frequently those two connect.
Versus this Texas defense and all, like I was saying, CSU is near and dear to my heart. My dad went to the school. My son graduated from the school. It's kind of both of those things. But I definitely don't agree with that 32 points. But no, it's definitely one of those games for, an explosive offense like, Quinn Ewers to, come out there and try to make a statement. Whether he does or not, that depends on him, though.
It's also going to be interesting to see if the running backs, the running back room kind of steps up, because CJ Baxter tore his ACL in practice. I'm not exactly sure if,
he looked good in relief of Brooks last year when Brooks tore his ACL. Yeah, it's just a tough break for Longhorn running backs. But I'm wondering if we'll see Arch Manning in the second half. If this game is as ugly as the odds makers think it's going to be, where Texas actually does cover the 32.5 point spread and it's like 42-7 at halftime, I doubt that happens. Ewers would literally have to play out of his mind for that to happen. But if that were to happen, I'm wondering if we'd see Arch Manning in the second half. I do think it's possible that we see Arch Manning the second half of some blowouts this year. And this is probably one of those games where we get to actually see Arch Manning in limited reps get his feet in the water.
Yeah. Likely that, but I mean, would Sarkisian really want to cause a quarterback controversy? If Arch Manning were to come in and actually, it would put a good.
That's a good point, William, which is why if he does this, I think he won't do it until the fourth quarter. Even if it's a 42-7 game, I don't think he'd put Manning in until the fourth quarter, because the fourth quarter, all he'd have to do is hand the ball off, and he wouldn't have to throw in third downs. Literally just have to bleed the clock, and that wouldn't affect Ewers. Doing that would give him some reps, but it wouldn't be enough to create a controversy. Because if you put Arch in the third quarter and Arch plays out of his mind, like you said, it creates a controversy. But if you put him in for one quarter and you call mostly running plays, it probably alleviates the controversy, at least for now, because there wouldn't be enough of a sample size to argue that.
Letting him get in there and get some reps. I can definitely understand the thought, make sure everybody's, doing all right and can handle the, the crowd atmosphere.
I don't think he will do it in conference play, but he might do it in non-conference play.
But I mean,
This conference play is just a different animal compared to non-conference play.
yeah.
All right. What else do we have for North Texas, South Atlanta, Stony Brook, Marshall? No to the 5 p.m. games. 6 p.m. games. No. 7 p.m. games.
We just, I think William and I had just both kind of talked about the games that we thought, were interesting. I mean, obviously everybody's got their team.
Do you have West Kentucky, Alabama on your schedule, William? I'm not sure if that's on the list of games you sent me. I mean, there's a bunch of good 7:30 games. But do you want to mention, because I feel like UNLV Houston, West Kentucky, Alabama, those are the only 2 games at 7 that are decent enough to mention before we get to the 7:30 games, which is really where a lot of these games come into play.
I mean, I think people are going to watch Alabama just because they want to see how Caitlin DeBoer does. I mean,
and Milroe. Yeah,
it's going to happen. But I don't think people will be watching after the first half because we kind of know how it's going to go.
Yeah. I'll take Alabama 35-7. UNLV Houston. This game, I'm going to briefly mention this game because UNLV's got an NFL receiver that not a lot of people are talking about named Ricky White. And he's probably the best receiver UNLV's had since Steve Smith. And Houston's got a quarterback named Donovan Smith. I know you're not big on him. I saw Ian Cummings' mock draft of PFN. He has him at number 2 in his mock draft, the 7-round mock. I don't think he goes that high. But I think UNLV Houston, this is a fun week 1 matchup. I like the Cougars, but I think the Red Rebels are going to make this close. I'm going 35-28. Rebels cover the point spread, but the Cougars win the game straight up. But I think this game's going to be closer than the experts think, UNLV Houston. You want to mention either of those games, William? Because I think the bulk of the good matchups is 7:30. Because 7:30, you've got Fresno State, Michigan. You've got Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Those are really the 2 signature games in that 7:30 time slot.
Yeah, we can move on to those.
Let's get to the Michigan game first. Fresno State, Michigan. Michigan's first game since winning a title last year. I like the Wolverines. I think they're going to come out and make a statement. I'm going to go 42-14 Wolverines.
Wolverines, that's going to be an interesting case this year too. Just after everything comes down and after everyone's talking about it's the game people love and the game people love to hate. I mean that's everything. All in there. So.
Yeah, if Mark Emmert was still commissioner of the NCAA, maybe he'd say something ridiculous. I just keep thinking of the dean in Animal House yelling double secret probation. Whenever I hear the words Michigan and I hear about the sign stealing scandal, I just think of the top secret probation joke from Animal House. I don't know why I think of that. Maybe that's because I'm an Ohio State fan, but I just think of that and I associate it with Michigan football now. It'd be funny if somebody that worked for the NCAA said Michigan's on double secret probation in a press conference. I just think that would be hilarious. But yeah, I do like Michigan over Fresno State.
I think we're just going to be able to see, what they look like with new coach, new quarterback. It's kind of the most turnover that you could possibly have as a team when you've got like that much new staff and also new personnel. There are teams that have new coaches like Alabama, but when you have a new coach and a new quarterback and they didn't necessarily come together on the same train, it's going to be interesting just to see. I mean, it's nice that they get to kind of get their feet wet against a team like Fresno State. I don't think they're going to have any difficulty.
The underdog factor of Fresno State and, against these things, because Jake Hayner came out of there, a couple other ones like Derek Carr. And I really, want them to win, but nah, Michigan's going to have this no matter what.
Yep.
They just had such a dominant team last year, and even without the coach, this is the same coaching staff, or whatever you want to say to
Yep.
that effect going down, and it's just going to be too much for them.
We've got 3 games left. We've got Notre Dame, Texas A&M. We've got the Sunday night game between USC, LSU, and then we've got the Monday night game between Boston College, Florida State. And then after those 3 games, we'll get to the 12-team playoff. But Notre Dame, Texas A&M, I want to break down Notre Dame's left tackle that was supposed to replace Joe Alt tore his ACL in camp, so he's out for the year. I think Nick Scorton's going to have an easier time getting to the quarterback. I still like Notre Dame to win this game, but I think this is going to be the most competitive game. 24-20 Notre Dame. I think this is going to be the closest game of all the Saturday night games because week 0 over-delivered with upsets. So I'm expecting week 1 to under-deliver with upsets because that's usually how it is in college football, William and Brandice. Whenever one week over-delivers with upsets, the next week under-delivers with upsets.
I don't know. I think upsets are kind of unpredictable. It makes sense that, you have that kind of push and pull that sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But like, I'm always team underdog and I love to see the upsets. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I've been kind of a Texas A&M fan for a minute now. I think they've had some highs and some lows. And I'm interested to see, how Mike Elko is able to coach this team to a possible win against Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame is
Notre
definitely
Dame's left tackles out for the year. Could be an easy matchup for Nick Scorton, who I have at 31 on my big board, mocking the Patriots in round 2 to replace Judon, but he has first-round tape. Good run stuffer, good pass rusher. Not going to be facing Notre Dame's best left tackle, so he might be able to get to Riley Leonard. And that's the thing, Riley Leonard versus Connor Weigman. Notre Dame's got a lot of good NFL prospects in the secondary, and Texas A&M, even though they lost Evan Stewart to the portal, Anis Smith to the NFL, they do have Moose Muhammad back. And Texas A&M's receivers, Notre Dame's corners, I think that's a really fun matchup, William. And, Notre Dame's got some good defensive tackles, Howard Cross III, Ryan Smith. Texas A&M's got some good interior linemen. This is going to be a fun game. There's a few fun matchups like A&M receivers, Notre Dame's defensive backs, Notre Dame defensive tackles, Texas A&M interior. The quarterbacks, obviously, Weigman and Riley Leonard, both. Leonard comes from Duke to Notre Dame in the portal. And this is also going to be there's going to be a Riley Leonard, Mike Gelko reunion. William Brandice, something we didn't really touch on because Riley Leonard was Elko's quarterback at Duke. Now he's going to be facing his former head coach in his first game at Notre Dame. So
yeah, so it's really kind of a it could be a win-win for Mike Elko because if he does very well, he can be like, yeah, I taught that guy everything I knew. He knows. But if he beats him, now you look like maybe he was just good and you weren't.
I hope Riley Leonard gives Mike. I know some NFL players do jersey exchanges. I hope Riley Leonard gives Mike Elko his jersey after Notre Dame wins. I think that'd be hilarious.
I wonder if that Elko is back there behind line of scrimmage, trying to impersonate, Riley Leonard, like. But no,
yeah.
You know me, I'm automatically going to go straight for the quarterbacks, and like I said, I've said it, the thing with Connor Weigman and what I see, it looked like his footwork and just what he's trying to put extra into it. He drives his front foot into the ground, snaps his wrist, and I saw a video of Josh Allen doing this in like 2018, and it was such. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? You're like putting that little extra into it. And it's like, you got to clean up your mechanics, to where the touch, that floats off your fingertips just right. But like I said, and then I'd watch Weigman step back and, throw an awesome bomb or an awesome pass. And it was one of those things. But, Leonard was the same way that I wanted to root for the guy there. But, at Duke, it looked like, he didn't have a whole lot around him, to do much with. And, but yeah, I definitely see Notre Dame winning. I do love the, Texas A&M thing. That's one of those things I always think about, like Johnny football, how much fun he was playing, and just some of those guys in college football that were so great. But I definitely pick Notre Dame.
Yeah, and Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Right now, my top 5 quarterbacks for the NFL draft, I have Shedeur at 1, Beckett 2, Ewers at 3. Those 3 I have second-round grades on, but I all mocked him in the first round. I have Dylan Gabriel at 4. I have a third on Gabriel at 74, mocked him in the second round. And Jalen Milroe, my QB 5. But I think if there's a guy that's going to sneak into the top 5, it's either going to be Riley Leonard of Notre Dame or Connor Weigman of Texas A&M. It's going to be one of those two. It's just a gut feeling, but we'll see. Another guy who could potentially sneak into that top 5 is LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, but Miller Moss, Garrett Nussmeier are playing in Allegiant Stadium, and they are charging $104.50 for tickets to Allegiant Stadium, the non-conference game. This is the most expensive ticket for week 1 at Allegiant Stadium. They're charging $100 for that game. Actually, Kyle Fields charging $199, so I stand corrected on that. But
I don't know. I tried to get tickets to the Clemson game at Mercedes-Benz, and I'm saying the Clemson game just to give them a little boost.
I'm on CBSSports.com. I'm loading up the schedules. 117.30. That's so Georgia's number 2 or 3. They're in the top 3 for most expensive, but okay, they're number 2. They're ahead. So LSU Notre Dame's the 3rd most expensive ticket this week. Number 2 is Georgia Clemson, and number 1 is Texas A&M Notre Dame. Unless I missed something here, but
I just don't see USC even keeping up with LSU. So.
Colorado's number 3. Colorado's number 4. They're the 4th most expensive ticket, $97. They're the only other game in striking distance of $100. But I think that's because of the hype culture Deion's created, the buzz entering this year. I think that's a lot due to the hype right now. And as long as Colorado wins games, it's going to be expensive to get a ticket. I mean, but yeah. I like LSU in this one. I think this is going to be a fun game. I actually think I'm going 35-21. I actually think USC is going to keep things interesting in the first half. And it's only going to be like a 7 to 10 point game after 3 quarters, but I think LSU pulls away in the 4th.
Yeah, and I can see it close, with Link or anyway, the coach at USC, but I just feel that Garrett Nussmeier and LSU is too much for him, considering what I've seen in these players. So
LSU's offensive tackle tandem of Will Campbell and Emory Jones, probably the best in the country. So I think they're going to win.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to hop off in a second here, but I just wanted to know, of all of the week 1 games, what do you guys think the biggest upset will be, or will there be any upset?
Okay, Florida State, Georgia Tech. Florida State's going to beat Boston College. I mean, that's the Monday night game, but I'm making that optional because it is getting kind of late, and I really don't think that's going to be much of a contest. Ugalele, he's going to rebound against Boston College, I think. But yeah, I like LSU and I like Florida State. But I think Boston College's offense I've got 42-28 Florida State, but I think Boston College's offense surprises people, and the Eagles find a way to cover the spread, but Florida State still wins. But because everybody's expecting Florida State to rout Boston College after losing to Georgia Tech. I think Boston College actually scores 28, but they lose to just a superior Florida State team as Ugalele rebounds. But yeah, that's going to do it for week 1 game previews. I'll let William give his 12-team playoff, and then we'll sign off. Because I know that's what our audience came here for. If you got a 12-team playoff, you can present that as well, Brandice, and then we'll sign off. Because
I'll just go 1 to 12 on seeds right now, and we'll lay the brackets. We'll come back with Brandon next week and put the brackets down. But like I said, I'll start at 1. I've got 1, Alabama, 2, Ohio State, 3, Miami, 4, Utah, 5, Georgia, 6, Oregon, 7, Notre Dame, 8, Texas, 9, LSU, 10, Tennessee, 11, Mizzou, and 12, I got to go for the underdog here. I got to throw me some Iowa Hawkeyes.
yeah, Iowa was number 13. They lost out to a group of 5 team. I think, who's your group of 5 team, William?
Let's see, who was that? Group of 5 would have been
because I wanted to put Iowa in my playoff, but I'm pretty certain if Notre Dame gets in, would they be the group of 5 team? Would they be the de facto group of 5 team as an independent, or would somebody else get in?
Yeah, I've got Notre Dame going up there, so
yeah,
that's where I was trying to figure it out. And I've got them rated pretty high.
Part, but yeah, next week looks a lot shorter. I think next week's show will be a lot shorter. So next week we'll have the playoff. We'll have Brandice's playoff next week, and there's really only like 5 games next week. I mean, looking at the schedule really quickly, Michigan, Texas is a game to watch. Texas, Michigan, that's a game to watch. Iowa. Then at 3:30, you have Iowa State, Iowa. That's the second big game in week 2 for college football. The third game is probably third big game in week 2 is probably Colorado, Nebraska, and then you have Tennessee, North Carolina State. That's number 4, and Boise State, Oregon. That's literally it for next week. Those are literally the only 5 exciting games. So this is probably the worst week 2 I've ever seen, because it is a very underwhelming week 2 compared to previous seasons. But I think with 5 games instead of, however, because that's the thing, week 1 is always chaos, William. And then once you get to week 2 or week 3, it usually settles down. But there's literally only 5 exciting games next week for week 2. So we'll have a shorter show. It'll be more organized. I'll be at my apartment instead of at my parents' house with all the doctor's appointments I have coming up. But yeah, that'll do it for this week. I'm thinking maybe we'll go with, I don't know for a thumbnail yet. I'm thinking either Michigan thumbnail or a Tennessee thumbnail for next week, with Tennessee going to North Carolina State. A lot of it's just going to depend on who does well. Maybe we'll go with an Iowa thumbnails with Iowa State, Iowa on CBS. Maybe we'll go with an Iowa Hawkeye for a thumbnail, because I know William is high on the Hawkeyes. But yeah, right now it's looking like it'll be either Michigan, Iowa, or Tennessee for the thumbnail next week. It just depends on which of those games is the biggest matchup. But anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I'm all right. I think I said everything. Thank you, Brandice. Thanks, Chris, for being here.
Yep, great job tonight, Brandice. I thought our team did a fantastic job, and I think next week will be a lot smoother with less games to talk about, because I kind of figured this would be 45 minutes to an hour. I didn't think it'd be an hour 15. But next week we'll have Brandice's bracket plus we'll have 5 game breakdowns instead of the 10 to 15 that we had this week. So that'll be much easier, and we sort of already know what games are on that list. William can tweak it or add 1 to 2 other games, but I think we hit it on the big 5: Michigan, Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Colorado, Nebraska, Tennessee, North Carolina State, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Iowa State, and Oregon, Boise. I think those are the big 5 next week. South Carolina, Kentucky is an SEC game at 3:30. That's another one I'm kind of curious about. Brock Vandergrift versus Landon Sellers. That actually might be a fun 3:30 game, SEC conference game. So that we'll add that to the list for next week, because I almost forgot that game. And, that is a game we probably should add to that mix. But yeah. All right. That'll do it for this week. We're signing off. Enjoy your evenings.